Jack knew something was wrong when his morning shower turned into a weak, pathetic drizzle. At first, he thought it was just a plumbing issue. Maybe an old pipe giving out, maybe some city maintenance they forgot to warn people about. But when he turned off the water, there was still a faint, distant hissing sound. Like water running somewhere it shouldn't be. Like his house was bleeding. That's when the real nightmare started. His water bill had doubled last month. He chalked it up to summer and his occasional laziness with the sprinklers, but this month? It had tripled. He stared at the numbers on the bill, his jaw tightening. There was no way he had used that much water. He barely watered his lawn, took normal-length showers, and didn't own a pool. His mind started racing. Maybe there was a leak underground. Maybe some faulty pipe was dumping water into the abyss beneath his home. Then, late one night, curiosity and frustration led him outside with a flashlight. The night was quiet, except for the distant croaking of frogs and the faint trickling of water. And that's when he saw it. A line of fresh PVC piping snaking its way from his main water supply. It disappeared into the ground and re-emerged on the other side of the fence. Karen's fence. Jack's stomach dropped. No way. He had to be imagining this. He knelt down, pressing his hand against the pipe. It was vibrating slightly. Water was actively flowing. He felt a hot rush of anger boiling up inside him. This wasn't just some mistake. Someone had deliberately tapped into his water supply. And judging by the direction of the pipes, it wasn't just someone. It was her. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA. The woman who fined people for leaving their trash bins out 10 minutes too long. The woman who complained about unsightly wind chimes. The woman who had the nerve to report Jack when his lawn was too patchy during a drought. And now, she was stealing from him? Jack's hands clenched into fists. He needed proof. The next morning, Jack woke up early, determined to confirm what he already suspected. He installed a small hidden camera near the suspicious piping and set up an alert for any movement. Throughout the day, his phone buzzed with notifications. Clips started piling up. A maintenance worker, hired by Karen, checking the pipes. Water pressure fluctuations. And then, the clearest evidence of all, Karen herself, in broad daylight, checking the connection with a smug, satisfied look on her face. Jack could feel his blood pressure rising with every second of footage. This wasn't just a minor theft. This was full-scale water piracy. He imagined her, sipping a cocktail next to her perfect blue pool, cooling off in stolen luxury while he barely had enough pressure to wash shampoo out of his hair. By noon, he couldn't take it anymore. He marched straight to her front door, fists tight at his sides. Karen opened the door with her usual expression, a mix of arrogance and fake concern. "Oh, Jack. What a surprise." Jack didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Why the hell is my water bill higher than a California drought fine?" Karen blinked, feigning confusion. "Oh dear, that sounds awful. Maybe you should check for leaks." Jack took out his phone and pressed play on the video. Karen's face remained neutral for the first few seconds, but when she saw herself on camera, her lips tightened. That's ridiculous," she scoffed. "This could be anyone." "Anyone?" Jack said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Anyone who happens to look exactly like you? You're on my property, Karen. Messing with my water. Connecting your pool to my supply. Explain that." Karen folded her arms, tilting her head. "Listen, Jack. This neighborhood has rules. Rules that keep the community looking nice, respectable. I do a lot of work to maintain those standards, and, honestly, some of us contribute more than others. It's only fair that—" Jack cut her off. "Are you seriously trying to justify stealing?" Karen let out a sharp, condescending laugh. "Oh please. It's just water. We all share resources here, don't we? You should want to help the community." Jack felt his hands shake with the urge to strangle the nearest potted plant. "Karen, you literally fine people for parking 1 inch over the curb. And now you're telling me I should just accept that you're stealing hundreds of dollars worth of water every month. Karen sighed dramatically, as if she were exhausted by his petty little concerns. Oh, Jack, you're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be. If you really want, I'll look into getting it disconnected. But honestly, you should be thanking me. A pool raises property values. Jack couldn't believe what he was hearing. Oh, trust me, Karen. I will get this disconnected. But I'm not stopping there. Karen rolled her eyes. Oh, what are you going to do? Call the HOA? I am the HOA, Jack. That was it. That was the moment Jack decided that reporting her wasn't enough. Fines weren't enough. Embarrassing her at an HOA meeting wasn't enough. She had declared war. And if Karen wanted a war, he was going to give her one. The moment Jack walked back into his house, he pulled out his phone and called Ethan. Ethan had lived in the neighborhood long before Karen took over the HOA, and if there was anyone who hated her more than Jack, it was him. Ethan picked up on the second ring. What's up? Ethan grumbled. Karen's stealing my water, Jack said, getting straight to the point. There was a pause. Then a low, dangerous chuckle. Oh, is that so? Jack exhaled slowly. I need a way to stop her. A way she won't see coming. Another pause. Then, Ethan said the words that would change everything. Jack, how do you feel about Saltwater? Jack frowned. What? Ethan's voice took on a mischievous edge. You ever seen what happens when a chlorine pool gets hit with a saltwater system? Jack had no idea where this was going, but judging by Ethan's tone, he was about to find out. And it was going to be glorious. Jack sat in his garage, tapping his fingers against the workbench as Ethan leaned back in a lawn chair, smirking like a man who had just been given permission to commit a crime without consequence. The idea of turning his entire water system into saltwater was so absurd that Jack almost laughed it off. Almost. But then he thought about Karen, lounging by her stolen pool, sipping some overpriced drink with a smug little grin on her face while his water bill bled him dry. That thought alone was enough to make him seriously consider it. Ethan scratched his beard, pulling out a notepad and scribbling down some calculations. All right, so here's the deal. Converting your house to a saltwater system isn't hard. The trick is making sure it's concentrated enough to mess with her pool without making it completely unusable for you. Jack ran a hand through his hair. And you're sure this will work? Ethan grinned. Oh, buddy, I guarantee it. Her pool's a chlorine system. Salt water will throw everything out of whack. The pH will go nuts, the filtration system will get clogged, and if she doesn't catch it in time, say goodbye to crystal clear blue, hello cloudy swamp mess. Jack exhaled slowly, feeling a dangerous kind of satisfaction bubble up in his chest. All right, let's do it. The next few days were spent gathering supplies. Ethan helped Jack install a saltwater filtration system, making sure the salt levels were high enough to disrupt Karen's pool but still manageable for regular household use. Jack had to admit it was actually a pretty nice upgrade. His showers felt better, his dishes seemed cleaner, and the best part? He barely noticed a difference in his daily life. But Karen's pool? That was another story. It started small. Jack made sure to keep an eye on her backyard through the tiny gaps in the fence, watching for any sign of trouble. A few days passed without much happening, but then he noticed it. The water wasn't quite as clear as it used to be. Instead of the pristine, sparkling blue that Karen took so much pride in, there was a faint, almost imperceptible haze starting to form. By the end of the first week, the haze had turned into a full-blown cloudy mess. Jack had to bite his tongue to keep from laughing when he saw Karen standing at the edge of her pool, hands on her hips, furiously staring into the murky water as if she could will it back to normal. The real fun started when she called over a pool technician. Jack made sure to be outside, casually watering his lawn, as the guy tested the water and frowned. Karen stood beside him, arms crossed, clearly impatient. Well, she demanded. The technician shook his head. Something's off. Your chlorine levels are way out of balance. And there's a lot of salt in here. Way more than there should be. Karen's face twisted into something ugly. Salt? How the hell did salt get in my pool? The technician shrugged. I mean, could be a bad batch of chemicals, could be cross-contamination. But you're gonna need to drain it and reset the system. Jack nearly choked on his own laughter. Drain it? That was going to cost her thousands. Karen, of course, wasn't going to take that lying down. That afternoon, she stormed over to Jack's front door, pounding so hard he thought she was going to break it down. When he opened it, she didn't even give him a chance to speak before launching into a tirade. You did something to my pool, she hissed. Jack blinked innocently. Your pool? Why would I do anything to your pool? Karen jabbed a finger at his chest. Don't play dumb with me, Jack. The water's full of salt, and I know you had something to do with it. Jack folded his arms, tilting his head. Karen, I'm not sure what you want me to say. I don't even have a pool. How could I possibly have affected yours? Karen's eye twitched. I don't know yet, but I will figure it out. And when I do, you're going to pay for it. Jack sighed dramatically. You know, Karen, I did recently switch my house over to a saltwater system. Maybe that's what you're noticing. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. He could practically see the gears turning in her head as she tried to figure out how to argue against that. The beauty of it was that he hadn't done anything illegal. His water system was his own business. If she happened to be stealing from it and suffered the consequences, well, that was on her, wasn't it? Karen's nostrils flared. This isn't over. Jack grinned. Looking forward to it. The next few days were a delight. Karen was in full panic mode, trying everything she could to fix her pool without draining it. But the salt had already done its damage. The water remained stubbornly cloudy, and Jack could hear her screaming at customer service representatives over the phone from his own backyard. Then came her next move, pure, petty retaliation. HOA violations started showing up in Jack's mailbox. First, it was for his unapproved water system modification, which was nonsense since it was inside his house. Then it was his mailbox being the wrong shade of beige. Then something about his trash cans being visible from the street, even though they were exactly where they had always been. Jack wasn't stupid. He knew what she was doing. She couldn't prove he had sabotaged her pool, so she was trying to drown him in paperwork instead. Unfortunately for Karen, Jack had something she didn't: patience. Instead of getting angry, he documented everything. He took pictures, saved letters, even recorded conversations with neighbors who had also been victims of Karen's ridiculous HOA rulings. And then, when the moment was just right, he filed an official complaint with the HOA board, complete with all his evidence. The timing couldn't have been better. Because what Jack had suspected all along turned out to be true. Karen had been misusing HOA funds for years, slapping homeowners with arbitrary fines while pocketing extra money for herself. And once people started looking into her records, they found even more shady dealings. Jack wasn't just taking down Karen's pool. He was taking down Karen herself. And when he saw the notice go out that an emergency HOA meeting had been called to discuss financial discrepancies, he knew he had won. Jack arrived at the emergency HOA meeting early, sitting near the back where he could observe everything unfold. The room was packed, filled with homeowners who had long grown tired of Karen's reign but never had enough ammunition to take her down. Until now. He watched as she walked in, head held high, as if she wasn't moments away from a public execution. She still believed she could talk her way out of it. That was her mistake. The HOA president, a man named Richard who had been far too lenient with Karen for years, cleared his throat and called the meeting to order. A stack of documents sat in front of him, and Jack knew exactly what was inside. The records of Karen's misconduct, the financial discrepancies, the complaints that had been swept under the rug for too long. Karen sat in her usual seat, crossing her arms as if this was a minor inconvenience instead of a full-blown inquisition. "All right, let's get this over with," she said, rolling her eyes. Richard adjusted his glasses, looking uncomfortable. Karen, we have reason to believe that there have been serious misuses of HOA funds under your management. A murmur rippled through the room. People leaned forward, waiting for the moment they had all been hoping for. Karen scoffed. That's ridiculous. I have done nothing but keep this community in order. If anything, I should be thanked for the work I've put into this neighborhood. Jack almost laughed at the audacity. She really thought she could spin this into a self-sacrificial act. Richard sighed and slid a folder across the table. According to our audit, there are thousands of dollars in unexplained expenses. Charges that don't line up with any community projects or maintenance costs. And then there are the fines. He glanced at the papers, flipping through them. Fines that seem to have been selectively enforced against certain homeowners while others, yourself included, have been exempt. Karen's smug expression flickered, but she recovered quickly. Oh, come on. Do you know how many hours I spend making sure this community meets the highest standards? If a few fees weren't logged properly, it was obviously an oversight. Richard frowned. An oversight that happened dozens of times? And what about the personal expenses charged to the HOA account? A catering bill for a private event? A landscaper that only worked on your yard? The murmuring grew louder. People were catching on now. This wasn't just a mistake. It was theft. Karen's face hardened. I don't have to sit here and be accused of things I haven't done. If you don't appreciate the work I put in, then maybe I should just resign. Jack smirked. There it was. The moment she realized she couldn't win. Richard exchanged a look with the rest of the board members before folding his hands. Karen, your resignation is not enough. A formal review is being conducted, and legal action may be taken depending on what we find. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, real panic flickered in her eyes. You can't be serious. Oh, we're serious, Richard said, his voice steel. Jack sat back, enjoying the show as Karen realized her power had officially crumbled beneath her. The vote was unanimous. Karen was removed from her position, and an investigation into the missing funds was opened. Jack had won. 2 weeks later, a moving truck pulled up to Karen's house. Jack stood on his porch, watching as she stomped back and forth, barking orders at the movers. She was leaving. The neighborhood had turned on her completely, and instead of sticking around to deal with the consequences, she had chosen to cut her losses and run. Jack took a long sip of his coffee, savoring the sight. Karen caught him watching and glared. Enjoying yourself? She snapped. Jack grinned. Immensely. She rolled her eyes, turning away, but not before he caught the faintest hint of embarrassment on her face. The mighty Karen, finally dethroned. The final insult came when the pool maintenance truck showed up. Jack heard the conversation from his driveway. The salt had permanently damaged her pool system, and the cost to repair it was outrageous. Karen had no choice but to sell the house as is, pool disaster included. Jack couldn't have planned a better ending if he tried. A week later, the neighborhood held a block party. It wasn't officially to celebrate Karen's departure, but everyone knew the real reason. There was music, barbecue, and laughter, the kind of carefree atmosphere that hadn't existed while Karen was ruling over them with an iron fist. Jack stood by the grill, flipping burgers, when Ethan wandered over with a beer in hand. You know, Ethan said, taking a sip, I think this is the happiest I've ever seen this neighborhood. Jack chuckled. It's amazing what happens when you remove a parasite. Ethan raised his drink in a toast. To Karen's pool. May it forever remain a salty wasteland. Jack clinked his soda can against Ethan's bottle. To Karen's pool. As the sun set and the party continued, Jack couldn't help but feel completely satisfied. No more ridiculous HOA fines. No more stolen water. And best of all, no more Karen.